Tu es en train d'écouter le podcast du voyageur éclectique.
I want to continue to build a lasting basis for U.S.-Soviet cooperation for a more peaceful future for all mankind. The triumph of democratic ideas in Eastern Europe and Latin America, and the continuing struggle for freedom elsewhere, all around the world, all confirm the wisdom of our nation's founders. Tonight, we work to achieve another victory, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind.
This is the 6th edition of the Eclectic Traveler. I have to say, welcome back. 2014, a year that might or might not be as radical as 1968.
And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
During this year, in the United States, the right-wing political institutions were fighting to keep up policies of segregation among their Negro population. While in Mexico, the government approved a military action to kill college students in an event called La Matanza de Tlatelolco.
Pero de lo que estoy más orgulloso de esos 6 años es del año de 1968.
A genocide that the government ignores even until now, but claims as unfortunate as any statistic. While the Mexican government only acknowledges 20 people killed by the military, many have testified of hundreds being killed for peaceful manifestations regarded by the government as communist threats.
De estos pequeños grupos de cobardes terroristas.
Just like many high-rank Republicans here in the United States argue that communism and socialism would take over the country through the civil rights movements, Mexicans suffer the same. And although it is true that many of these movements suggested leftist ideologies, and in some cases quite extreme, the fact remains that a monopoly of violence will never ever hesitate to bring down the iron fist to whoever fits in scope.
I have 2 words for you: predator drones. You will never see it coming. You think I'm joking?
This Mexican massacre is just a small and to some extent comparable example to Ukraine and Venezuela's movements. While in Mexico the left wanted to expose the corruption of the right, the Ukrainian and Venezuelan movement strive for the opposite. While in Mexico this massacre will never be punished by any international court due to the right-wing country allies, Ukraine and Venezuela are and will get support from international institutions to allow any actions against the left. Hello?
You're such a leftist. Who are you in favor of?
I'm not in favor of either or. I'm just trying to be objective.
Eres un izquierdista naco.
Okay.
Going back. Ukrainians were capable of overthrowing President Victor. That is as far as the media tells us. And with Venezuela, might or might not be the case. The question though is, were the people really the ones that overthrew President Yanukovych?
How does you make countries do stuff you want?
You might offer foreign aid.
Or did they get any foreign masked aid by high-profit institutions through the policy making of powerful countries that sponsored and turned a blind eye for political and economic gain?
The UK's Serious Crime Agency gave the list to Parliament but told MPs to keep it confidential.
What do you mean? Speak clearly.
Let me expand on this. Over the last few days, 88 Ukrainians died in clashes between pro-Western protesters and the Russian-dominated government. And the current, but not complete story, suggests that these manifestations from the people led the parliament no option but to be fair and remove the president. Now they want to arrest him. But he is missing. The Russians claim that Viktor Yanukovych was smuggled out of the country by the CIA.
Are you defending Victorcito?
I'm not defending anyone, I'm just trying to understand the picture and see if there are probably patterns among other nations. And if I find something, then we can have a better understanding regarding where Ukraine and Venezuela might head to. But before analyzing the variables, my sincere condolences to those that have died in the hope of having a better place. Out of all these movements, there is a side of the equation that we have to unfortunately keep in mind. These are the open gaps that can be used by developed monopolies of violence to profit from all this, as I just mentioned.
Look, it's no secret that many government officials have close ties to corporate America. Sometimes they're so intertwined, it's kind of hard to tell them apart. According to Alternet, 70% of the national intelligence budget is now spent on private contractors. And there are at least 1,931 firms across the country dedicated to fighting terrorism.
Although President Obama approached the Ukrainian movement with detachment, this doesn't mean that there is no U.S. interest in both movements, the Ukrainian and the Venezuelan.
Every effort is made to make sure that Ukraine is aligned with Europe. That's, I think, the important goal here.
There is a corporate interest for events like this, where they can work through the government, for instance, the government of the United States, since it's a leader of pro-Western reforms, to intervene either physically or financially, with the purpose of having a better maneuver of politics and economic scarcity in that region.
The Obama administration had to back off after all of South America reacted very strongly against him.
But analysts say that while you're looking at a more equal society, you are looking at an economy that's pretty messed up. In terms of, you see exports in terms of oil, but really nothing else. What can Maduro do to try and stabilize this country's economy?
Well, it isn't quite as bad as it's made out to be. I mean, you have to remember, if you look at, well, why did people vote for this party again in the December elections? It's because if you look at the last, 11 years or 12 years since the government got control over the oil industry, Venezuela has done very well. It's really only the last year and a half that you've had the really high inflation.
Hey, what are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that the exaggeration of facts through orchestrated mainstream media is necessary to twist facts with the hope to revolt people, confuse them, and potentially use this as a way to overthrow the governments if necessary. Now, question: how many countries do you think have undergone through this process?
Just 2 or 3 countries.
The United States has intervened and overthrown governments of Syria in 1949, Iran in 1953, Guatemala in 1954, Tibet in 1955 through the 70s, Indonesia in 1958, Cuba in 1959, Democratic Republic of Congo from 1960 to the 65, Iraq in 1960 to 63, the Dominican Republic in 61, South Vietnam in 63, Brazil in 64, Ghana in 66, Chile from 70 to 1963, Argentina in 1976, Afghanistan from 1979 to 89, Turkey from 1980s, Poland in 1980 to 81, Nicaragua from 1981 to the 90s, Cambodia from 1980s to 95, Angola 1980s, Philippines 1986, and the list goes on and on. And probably we'll know more countries that were affected by this phenomenon in coming years. All these coups were justified on their genuine interest to act in behalf of the people to liberate them. While after decades of the events, just corporate interest was the real winner.
What does this have to do with Ukraine?
Well, it has to do with the fact that all the overthrown governments I just mentioned started with similar patterns like the patterns presented in the Ukrainian and Venezuela movements. Take for instance 9/11.
What?
9/11, 1973, when President Allende was overthrown and Pinochet was put in place. Soon enough, the government was overthrown quite violently, and it took decades to understand the whole picture. During the Clinton administration, disclassified information was made available. The disclassified documents show how President Nixon acted in favor of telecommunications company ITT. Now, find more similarities between the Ukrainian and Chilean movements prior to the revolt.
Richard Nixon ordered the CIA director to make the economy scream.
Señor Nixon es presidente de Estados Unidos y yo soy presidente de Chile. Yo no tendré un término despectivo contra el señor Nixon mientras el señor Nixon respete al presidente de Chile.
Preparations began for the military coup. With US funding, everything was done to destabilize the economy. Truck drivers went on strike, bringing factories and shops to a standstill. There was a failed coup attempt on June the 29th, 1973. And then on September the 11th, with General Pinochet leading the army, the assault began on the presidential palace. Chile had enjoyed 41 years of uninterrupted, peaceful democratic rule. Now it was being violently overthrown.
So, do you think the Ukrainian movement was orchestrated?
Isn't it obvious? For one hand, Ukraine is perfect for foreign investment. It has so much potential for exploitation. Much profit you can get out of this country. On the other hand, since there is no other alternative, we have to agree with what Natalia is saying.
We have two evils, but we have to choose a better evil. And the better evil is European Union, because there you have some institutions, human rights institution.
Now, let me give you one last piece of the puzzle. Victoria Nuland. She is officially the U.S. Assistant of State for European and Eurasian Affairs. She's big game. Why? 5 reasons. First, she's married to Robert Kagan, important historian. Second, she has served in the highest advisory positions there could be. Third, she has worked closely with Europe and NATO affairs for many years. Fourth, she speaks fluent Russian. And fifth, she knows Russia better than many Russians. If you were to assign a CIA case officer to run the Ukrainian revolution, she would be your best bet.
Well, what you hear these two high U.S. officials discussing is literally putting members of the Ukrainian opposition, moving them around like as if they were playing chess on how to configure a new government in Ukraine.
Now, I'll leave you with this inconvenient conversation leaked by the Russian government of Victoria Nuland and the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt, where they discussed the U.S. strategy for political transition of Ukraine.
What do you think?
I think we're in play. The Klitschko piece is obviously the complicated electron here, especially the announcement of him as deputy prime minister. And you've seen some of my notes on the troubles in the marriage right now, so we're trying to get a read really fast on where he is on this stuff. But I think your argument to him, which you'll need to make, I think that's the next phone call we want to set up, is exactly the one you made to Yachts. And I'm glad you sort of put him on the spot on where he fits in this scenario. And I'm very glad he said what he said in response.
Good. So I don't think Klitsch should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you think what, in terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, you know, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yachts is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, you know, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week, you know. I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay, good. Well, do you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
My understanding from that call, but you tell me, was that the big three were going into their own meeting, and that Yachts was going to offer in that context a three-way, you know, 3+1 conversation or 3+2 with you. Is that not how you understood it?
No, I mean, that's what he proposed, but I think just knowing the dynamic that's been with them where Klitschko has been the top dog, he's going to take a while to show up for whatever meeting they've got. He's probably talking to his guys at this point. So I think you reaching out directly to him helps with the personality management among the three, and it gives you also a chance to move fast on all this stuff and put us behind it before they all sit down and he explains why he doesn't like it.
Okay, good. I'm happy. Why don't you reach out to him and see if he wants to talk before or after?
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Okay, I've now written, one more wrinkle for you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Can't remember if I told you this or if I only told Washington this, that when I talked to Jeff Feltman this morning, he had a new name for the UN guy, Robert Seri. Did I write you that this morning?
Yeah, okay. I saw that.
He's now gotten both Seri and Ban Ki-moon to agree that Seri could come in Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, you know, fuck the EU.
No, exactly. And I think we've got to do something to make it stick together, because you can be pretty sure that if it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it. And again, the fact that this is out there right now, I'm still trying to figure out in my mind why Yanukovych did that. But in the meantime, there's a Party of Regions faction meeting going on right now, and I'm sure there's a lively argument going on in that group at this point. But anyway, we could land jelly side up on this one if we move fast. So let me work on Klitschko, and if you can just keep, I think we want to try to get somebody with an international personality to come out here and help to midwife this thing. And then the other issue is some kind of outreach to Yanukovych, but we can probably regroup on that tomorrow as we see how things start to fall into place.
So on that piece, Jeff, when I wrote the note, Sullivan's come back to me, VFR, saying you need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick. So
okay.
Biden's willing.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thanks.